Hello, I'm Isabella Carter. I'm 24, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. A city of rain, boundless greenery, and countless memories I once believed I'd never want to face again. My family was middle class, my father managed a warehouse, and my mother worked night shifts as a nurse at our local hospital. 2 daughters lived in our house, but I never felt Emma, my older sister, and I stood at identical starting points. Emma was the beloved one, the child who consistently received unconditional adoration, costly presents, and chances I could solely imagine. I stopped counting how often I was measured against her. From school grades to looks to my behavior, "Why can't you be more like Emma?" became nearly a family motto. Initially, I attempted to demonstrate I was deserving also. But eventually, I recognized what I sought would never be attainable if I continued begging, hoping, or attempting to satisfy them. Therefore, I learned independence to forge my own route, even though internally I still yearned for just one instant of acknowledgement from my family. Today, following 4 years at Stanford, a school I attended on full scholarship, working part-time to finance every living cost, I graduated with highest distinction, summa cum laude. Clutching my diploma, I thought surely this would be a milestone significant enough for my family to desire celebrating with me. But standing in San Francisco's airport just before boarding my return flight to Portland, I sent a straightforward message in our family group chats. "Flight arrives at 3:00 p.m. Can someone collect me?" I didn't reference my degree or honors, merely a neat, concise request. The response came quicker and icier than I anticipated. Emma responded first, "We're busy. Try Uber." A minute afterward, my mom contributed, "Why didn't you plan better?" I stared at the phone screen, my fingers typing back just 2 words, "No worries." Outwardly, I was composed, but inwardly, a hollow void seemed to expand deeper. I told myself I was accustomed to this, but the pain was still present. My ticket was for a window seat. As the aircraft rolled down the runway, I watched clouds drift past and contemplated the reunion at home, not because I anticipated open arms or warm congratulations, but because I had prepared myself for the instant I would confront them, the people who never believed I would become anyone of significance. They had no concept that tonight, when they activated the television or checked their phones, they would see me somewhere they could never have envisioned. And that instant would make them drop their phones. Have you ever felt forgotten in your own family? And if you're watching right now, where in the world are you? Leave a comment so I know I'm not alone. I still remember my 10th birthday vividly. It was a drizzly February morning, with Portland wrapped in gray clouds and fine raindrops clinging to windows. I woke with the excitement of a child, imagining that when I descended the stairs there would be cake, a few balloons, and my mom smiling, saying, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." But when I stepped down the stairs, the kitchen was filled solely with the strong aroma of coffee and the sound of morning news on television. Mom was in her nurse's uniform, eating a quick bread slice while checking the clock. Dad sat hidden behind the newspaper, occasionally flipping a page while Emma was preparing for Dad to drive her to dance class. Nobody said a word about my birthday. When I quietly reminded them today is, Mom interrupted me. "I'm busy. We'll celebrate over the weekend." That weekend, I waited the entire time, but there was no cake, no candles, and naturally, nobody mentioned it again. Then, in 7th grade, I won first place in the citywide speech competition. It was the first time I stood on a big stage under bright lights, receiving a medal from the mayor himself. I looked into the audience, searching for a familiar face, but saw only strangers applauding. The seats reserved for my family were completely empty. Mom had texted earlier to say her hospital shift was running longer than expected, and Dad had to take Emma dress shopping for her school dance. I brought the medal home and hung it at the corner of my desk. But for the entire following week, nobody asked a single question or offered a word of congratulations. In contrast, just 1 month later, Emma participated in a school fashion show and only made it into the top 10. Yet, my parents took the whole family out to celebrate and even bought her a brand new sewing machine. The gap between us as sisters wasn't measured in blood, but in the cold, open imbalance of their affection. When Emma turned 16, my parents bought her a brand new car, saying it would make it easier for her to reach school and participate in extracurricular activities. I was 17 then, about to start my senior year of high school, and I wanted a vehicle so I could work part-time and save for college. When I asked, Dad simply said, "If you want one, earn the money yourself." So, I took a job as a cashier at a coffee shop in the mornings, and as a stock clerk at a grocery store in the evenings. Nearly a year later, I managed to buy a used car with peeling paint and a long tear across the back seat. The day I drove it home, nobody in the family bothered to come outside to see it or offer congratulations. Emma glanced through the window and said, half joking and half serious, "Looks like a delivery van." I gave a faint smile, said nothing, and walked straight to my room. But the hardest blow came during college application season. I was accepted into Stanford with a full scholarship, an achievement my homeroom teacher even said was a rare accomplishment in many years. Even so, I still needed some money for living expenses and books. I had hoped my parents could help out a little, just so I wouldn't have to work so much at the start of my studies. But when I brought it up, my father said bluntly, "You already have a scholarship. You don't need more. We have to save money for Emma. She just got into a fashion school in New York. The tuition there is expensive." Hearing that, I simply nodded. But inside, it felt like someone had slammed a door shut. From that moment, I understood more clearly than ever. Their love and support always came with conditions. The condition was that I had to choose the path they wanted, live in a way that made them proud, or be more like Emma. Otherwise, I was on my own, whether the waters were calm or stormy. So when I left Portland to begin my 4 years at Stanford, I carried with me the determination to rely on nobody but myself. Entering my freshman year, I knew I was stepping into an environment where most students came from wealthy families or had deep connections in academia and business. In the very first week, during introductions in my computer science class, I listened to classmates discuss summers in Europe, internships at major tech companies arranged by their parents, or startups they had already launched with family funding. My own story was much simpler. I had spent the entire summer working at a coffee shop to afford my textbooks. I wasn't ashamed, but I couldn't deny that at times I felt out of place. I worked the morning shift at a cafe near campus from 6000 to 80:30. The sound of the coffee grinder, the smell of freshly baked muffins, and the steady stream of hurried customers were what started each of my days. Some mornings, a professor from the department would stop by, surprised to see me behind the counter. I would just smile and say, "Just part of managing expenses." After my shift, I would rush to class, then spend my afternoons in the lab working on AI research. I was fortunate to be hired as an assistant to Professor Raymond, a leading expert in machine learning. At first, my tasks were limited to processing data and recording test results. But through persistence and always turning in work ahead of schedule, I gradually earned more important responsibilities. It was Professor Raymond who eventually introduced me to a small tech startup in Silicon Valley that was seeking a collaborator on a medical image analysis project. The first time I walked into the startup's office, I was surrounded by smart, passionate people. But I could also feel the weight of skeptical eyes on me. A few didn't bother to hide their surprise when they learned I was a sophomore, a woman, and came from a family with no background in technology. In our very first meeting, when I suggested a way to improve data processing speed, an older engineer gave a faint smile and said, "Sounds nice, but we're discussing a complex system here, not a class project." I didn't react. I just wrote it down, determined to prove myself with results. During the day, I worked with the team at the office. At night, back in my dorm, I kept coding, testing, and documenting every discovery. There were nights I stayed up until 300 in the morning, just to optimize an algorithm that would shave mere fractions of a second off the processing time. The next morning, even with dark circles under my eyes, I was still behind the coffee counter, smiling at customers. The project we were working on had the potential to save thousands of lives. An AI system capable of analyzing MRI scans and detecting early signs of life-threatening diseases with exceptional accuracy. At first, the idea was dismissed as too ambitious because it required an enormous amount of data and highly sophisticated deep learning models. I proposed combining deep learning with contextual image analysis, a new approach that would allow the AI to understand not just the abnormality itself, but also the surrounding structures related to it. Professor Raymond supported the idea, and the company formed a dedicated team to develop it, appointing me as the lead programmer. 3 intense years passed. We continuously refined the system, passed multiple rounds of clinical testing, and finally received an invitation to compete in the National Technology Innovation Competition. On the day of the presentation, I wore a simple suit, my hair neatly tied back, and stood under the stage lights with a steady voice. When the demo video played, showing results far surpassing our competitors, a murmur rippled through the audience. one of the judges, a Microsoft representative, leaned forward and took notes rapidly. When the MC announced that Lumina Diagnostics had won first place, I felt my hands tremble. Every sleepless night, every dismissive glance, every exhausting time shift, all of it converged into that moment. But the victory didn't end with a trophy and a certificate. Microsoft offered to collaborate on scaling the technology globally, while a major venture capital firm in San Francisco expressed interest in investing, valuing the company in the tens of millions of dollars. When the company officially restructured, I became co-founder and chief technology officer. The new San Francisco office was bright and modern, and every day I walked in with the feeling that I was rewriting my life story. For the first time, my bank account was comfortably full. But the greatest reward was proving to myself, and to those who had doubted me, that my worth was never defined by my background. Throughout that time, my family rarely asked about my work. They still thought I was doing something in tech, in vague terms. I didn't bother explaining, because I knew the day would come when the results would speak for themselves. What I didn't realize was that day was approaching faster than I could have imagined. Graduation day at Stanford began under the clear blue skies of June, with warm sunlight spilling across the campus. I stood among hundreds of students in red gowns, a square cap on my head, holding my summa cum laude diploma, proof of 4 years of sweat and tears. Around me, friends embraced their parents, arms wrapped tight, cheers mixing with a pop of confetti cannons bursting overhead. I kept smiling when someone pulled me into a group photo, but deep inside, I felt empty. 3 seats in the family section were completely vacant, and I knew nobody from Portland had flown down to be there for me. After the ceremony, I returned to my dorm to pack. The suitcase held not only clothes and a few personal items, but also the years I had walked through on my own, one step at a time. Today, I was flying back to Portland, a trip I had planned in advance, not just to stop by home, but to attend the awards ceremony for my startup. The event would be held at the Portland Art Museum Ballroom, one of the most prestigious venues in the city, and it would be broadcast live on a national news network. Before boarding my flight, I sent a message in the family group chat. Flight lands at 3:00 p.m. Can someone pick me up? I didn't add any explanation. Didn't mention that I would be on national television that evening. Partly because I wanted to see if they cared enough to ask, and partly because I had grown used to lowering my expectations. As the plane began to taxi, my phone buzzed. Emma's reply came first. "We're busy. Try Uber." Just 4 words, cold and final. A minute later, my mother added, "Why didn't you plan better?" I stared at the screen for a few seconds before typing back 2 words. "No worries." That was all. No anger, no defense, but I could feel a cold, hollow space growing inside my chest. The plane landed in Portland on time. As I wheeled my suitcase out of baggage claim, I was surrounded by warm reunions. Hugs, bouquets of flowers, voices calling out through tears. I didn't see a single familiar face. Not surprising, but still a sharp pang. I made my way to the rideshare area and ordered an Uber. A silver Toyota Camry pulled up, the door swung open, and I placed my suitcase in the trunk. The driver, a man in his early 50s with kind eyes, glanced at the diploma in my hand through the rearview mirror and asked, "Big day?" I smiled and answered simply, "Yeah." He nodded without another question, switching on a soft jazz track. I leaned my head against the window, watching the rain-damp streets and the lush green trees I knew so well. The city hadn't changed, but I had. Back at my temporary apartment, I quickly changed into a sleek black suit, tied my hair into a low bun, and applied light makeup. I wanted to walk into tonight's ceremony with the poise of someone who had carved her own path, without the backing of anyone else. The Portland Art Museum Ballroom glowed brightly that evening. A red carpet stretched across the entrance, golden light reflecting off the historic walls. Inside, round tables draped in white cloth stood beneath glittering chandeliers, crystal glasses sparkling under the warm glow. The air was filled with lively conversation, the clink of glasses, and the constant movement of reporters and camera crews. I was escorted to the section reserved for startup representatives. Looking around, I saw young founders, investors, and even a few familiar faces from past tech conferences. When the MC stepped onto the stage, all lights turned toward him. After a few award categories, his voice rang out, and the award for Best Technology Project of the Year, with $1.2 million in funding and a strategic partnership package from Microsoft, goes to Lumina Diagnostics. Co-founder and Chief Technology Officer, Isabella Carter. Applause erupted as the stage lights hit me. I I rose to my feet and walked to the podium, cameras clicking in rapid-fire chorus. On the giant screen, a video about the company played, shots of a modern lab, engineers working with focus, the AI system analyzing MRI scans with exceptional accuracy, and finally, a close-up of me reviewing a line of code, eyes intent. When the MC handed me the plaque and the check for $1.2 million, I felt the weight of the journey behind me, every late-night shift, every dismissive glance, every moment of being left behind. I took the microphone and looked out at the audience. I didn't search for my parents or Emma, but I knew that somewhere in a house in Portland, they were seeing me on their television screen. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate. To everyone who doubted me, thank you. You taught me to believe in myself. The room fell silent for a few seconds before the applause broke out, roaring through the elegant space like a wave. As I stepped off the stage, the phone in my pocket began to buzz over and over. The family group chat must have been lighting up with notifications, but I didn't rush to open it. I let it keep buzzing, blending into the chorus of congratulations from strangers who believed in my worth, like a background score announcing that a completely new chapter of my life had just begun. That evening, dinner at my parents' house unfolded like any other day. The kitchen glowed under warm yellow light, a pan of lasagna fresh from the oven filling the air with the scent of cheese mingled with the red wine my father was pouring. Emma sat across from our parents, eating while scrolling through her phone, occasionally laughing at something she saw on social media. In the living room, the television was tuned to the national news, the volume set low, just background noise nobody was really paying attention to. Everything carried on quietly until the MC's voice rang out clearly from the television. The award for Best Technology Project of the Year, with $1.2 million in funding and a strategic partnership from Microsoft, goes to Lumina Diagnostics co-founder and Chief Technology Officer Isabella Carter. My name dropped into the air like a stone into a still pond. My father froze mid-slice, the knife suspended in midair. My mother set her fork down and lifted her head toward the television. Emma stopped scrolling, her eyes shifting to the screen, and then the image appeared, me in a black suit, stepping onto the stage at the Portland Art Museum ballroom, holding the award plaque, a spotlight shining directly on me. The camera zoomed in on the moment I smiled, microphone in hand, and said, "To everyone who doubted me, thank you. You taught me to believe in myself." The room fell silent. My mother's mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. My father sat motionless, eyes locked on the screen, his brow furrowing as if trying to reconcile what he was hearing with the daughter he had once thought was just doing something with computers. Emma was the one who broke the silence, her voice so low it was almost to herself. "That's her," a mix of surprise and disbelief. As the broadcast continued, showing the company's profile video, numbers on the AI system's accuracy, shots of the modern lab, and scenes of the team at work, all three kept their eyes fixed on the screen. My mother leaned forward, narrowing her eyes as if to see more clearly while my father exhaled slowly. Then the string of notifications began. My mother's phone buzzed violently on the table, ting, ting, ting. She opened it to find a flood of messages from relatives, friends, and neighbors. "Oh my God. She's incredible. Congratulations to your family. So proud. Just saw Isabella on television." My father's phone lit up with calls from old colleagues. "Jeff, is that your daughter?" "Amazing." The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted from stunned silence to a kind of restless urgency. My mother turned to my father. "Did you know about this?" He shook his head slowly. "No, not at all." Emma said nothing, but her hands stayed clenched around her phone, eyes glued to the screen as if searching for more details about the ceremony. When the news segment ended, my mother immediately opened the family group chat and typed quickly, "Isabella, I just saw you on television. You're amazing. Call me back right away." The message sent but only showed a single blue check. Without waiting, she dialed my number directly. The phone rang and rang again. Nobody answered. My father tried a shorter message. "Are you free? I want to talk." That message also showed nothing but sent. Emma sat there in silence, but her expression suggested she had just lost something she had always held firmly. The position of the only child who got all the attention. I knew that in this moment they were surprised, curious, and perhaps a little uneasy. But the only thing they could do now was wait. And this time, I would make them wait longer than I ever had before. 2 days after the awards ceremony, I was in my San Francisco office reviewing the partnership plan with Microsoft when the receptionist informed me that 3 guests were waiting in the lobby. I was momentarily puzzled. I hadn't scheduled any meetings, but as soon as I heard their names, I knew exactly who they were: my father, my mother, and Emma. From the elevator area, I saw them standing near the reception desk. All 3 were dressed more formally than usual: my father in a dark blue button-down and neatly pressed slacks, my mother in a light floral dress, Emma in a cream-colored blazer, her hair styled in waves. As I approached, my mother offered a slightly stiff smile. "Honey, congratulations. I saw you on television. We're really proud of you." My father nodded and extended his hand like he was meeting a business associate. Emma's smile was thin, her eyes drifting around the lobby until they landed on the company's logo plaque behind the front desk, lingering there a moment too long. I invited them into a small meeting room, poured tea, and sat down across from them. At first, the conversation was filled with polite compliments. "You've really grown up." We had no idea the company was this big, but only a few minutes in, my mother leaned forward, her voice slow and deliberate. "Actually, we came today because we wanted to discuss something about Emma. You know, she's been dreaming of starting her own fashion brand for a long time, but she needs capital to get it off the ground. I think as a family, we should help each other." I set my teacup down without a word. My father picked up the thread, speaking as if proposing something perfectly reasonable. "What we mean is, you could invest in her. Not a lot, just enough for her to rent a space, get inventory. Think of it as contributing to the family. After all, you're doing well now." Emma sat beside them, silent, but her face betrayed a quiet expectation. I looked at the 3 of them, then leaned back slightly in my chair. In my mind, memories began to surface: my 10th birthday that nobody remembered, the speech medal hanging untouched in the corner of my desk, the year I worked 2 jobs to buy a beat-up car, and the time I asked for a little help with living expenses at Stanford, only to be told, "We have to save money for Emma." Those memories stacked up like worn dog-eared pages in a book. Faded perhaps, but never erased. My mother didn't seem to notice that I was lost in thought and kept pressing on. "We're family, Isabella. Blood ties mean we lift each other up. When you succeed, the whole family celebrates. And if your sister succeeds too, our family becomes even stronger." I let a faint smile touch my lips, but it never reached my eyes. "Family," I repeated slowly, my voice low and slightly rough. The truth is, it's taken me years to understand what that word means. At least in our house. My father frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I straightened my back, keeping my gaze steady. "It means I remember when I needed someone in the audience. Those seats were empty. When I needed a little financial help, the answer was no. But now, when I'm in a position to give, suddenly we're family becomes the reason." The air in the room grew heavy. My mother's tone softened, as if to smooth things over. "We know there were times in the past when we fell short, but it's different now. You're successful. We can all benefit. What's wrong with that?" I shook my head. "Whether it's wrong or not depends on how we define benefit. I can't recall a time when I benefited from this family's successes, unless you count the constant comparisons that made me feel I'd never measure up." Emma pressed her lips together, as if she was about to speak but stayed silent. I went on. "If Emma is truly passionate about fashion, she'll find a way to build her career. I believe that. But I won't put in money just to keep a family habit alive. The habit of using one person's achievements to prop up the favoritism already given to another." My mother leaned back slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her eyes. My father sighed as though ready to end the conversation, but I stood before he could. "I haven't forgotten that I'm your daughter," I said firmly. "But I also haven't forgotten that I was once treated like an outsider in my own home. And because of that, I will not repeat that cycle." As they rose to leave, I stayed seated, my gaze locked and my voice dropping, slow but clear. "I haven't forgotten I'm your daughter, but I haven't forgotten I was treated like an outsider in my own home." My words made my mother pause in the doorway. My father turned slightly toward me, and Emma kept her face still while her hand gripped the strap of her purse. I knew this was the moment to say everything, so nobody would think they could come back with the same request again. From the time I was little, I learned not to expect much from this family. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew whatever I got always came with conditions. If I chose the path you wanted, did exactly what you hoped, I got attention. If I went my own way, I was on my own, even in the hardest moments. I've lived that way for years. So today, I'm applying the same principle to all of you. Everyone is responsible for their own choices. My father's brow furrowed, as if he wanted to argue, but I raised a hand to show I wasn't finished. I never asked anyone to pay my tuition, never asked for a new car, never asked anyone to skip work to attend my graduation. So why now, when I'm successful, should I be responsible for someone else's plans just because of the word family? I stood on my own, and Emma can too, if she truly wants to. Passion isn't measured by how much money you can borrow from someone else. It's measured by how far you're willing to go to make it real. My mother tried to keep her voice gentle. But family has to help each other, Isabella. Blood ties can't turn their back. I shook my head, this time without circling around the point. Blood ties don't mean one side only takes and the other only gives. If family is a place where one person carries everything while the others only show up when they need something, then it's no longer family, and I won't take part in that model ever again. The air in the room grew heavier. I stood, walked to my desk, and opened a thick folder right in front of me. I'm going to continue living in San Francisco. The company is entering an expansion phase, and I've decided to invest most of my personal profits into a scholarship fund for young women pursuing STEM. I want girls like me, who have been underestimated because of their background or gender, to have the chance to chase their dreams without feeling like they're a burden. I lifted my gaze to meet my mother's eyes. That is the family I choose. One built on trust and mutual support, not pressure and favoritism. My father sighed and turned his face away. My mother pressed her lips together, the pleading look from earlier gone, replaced by disappointment and a trace of helplessness. Emma said nothing, but I could feel the tension in her shoulders as she walked past me toward the door. I escorted them to the hallway, stopping at the doorway. I know this isn't the answer you wanted to hear, but if you truly want this relationship to continue, it has to be rebuilt on respect and equality. If not, it's better to keep our distance. Nobody replied. Their footsteps faded down the hall until the building was silent again. Back in my office, I sat down and reopened the scholarship fund plan. With just a few clicks, I confirmed the list of the first young women who would receive support this year. Women who would not have to start from zero the way I once did. As I signed the confirmation, I felt a lightness in my chest. Not because I had said no, but because I knew I was investing in what I believed in, instead of repeating the patterns that once hurt me. I understood that from this day forward, my family would see me differently. They might resent me, they might go silent, or they might find a way to come back when they wanted something. But I also understood something far more important. I was no longer bound by the need for their approval. And that was a freedom I had spent years fighting for. After that meeting, I knew I needed a completely new beginning, not just in my work, but in my personal life. I spent weeks searching for a place that would give me the sense of safety and freedom I had never truly had growing up. And then I found it. A small but sunlit apartment in the Marina district of San Francisco, with a balcony facing the Golden Gate Bridge. Every morning, sunlight streamed through white curtains, scattering across the shimmering bay. Every night, the bridge lights sparkled like a string of jewels suspended in the dark sky. In the living room, I placed a large bookshelf, hung a few framed photos capturing milestones from my startup journey, and set a cozy armchair by the window, a spot where I could read or simply watch the waves roll toward the shore. Not long after, I adopted a golden retriever from the animal rescue shelter. I named him Milo, a simple, easy name, but to me, it stood for the warmth and loyalty I had once lacked. Milo quickly became my constant companion. In the mornings, we ran along the coastline, the sea breeze carrying a salty tang against my face. In the evenings, he sprawled at my feet while I worked or curled up beside me whenever I watched a movie. Work at Lumina Diagnostics still took up most of my time, but I made it a priority to engage more with San Francisco's startup community. I attended conferences, shared my story of starting from nothing, and listened to other journeys, each one carrying its own lesson, its own perspective. I joined a small circle of female founders, a group where we supported each other both professionally and emotionally. Over time, they became my second family, not bound by blood but always ready to celebrate my wins and stand by me when things got hard. I also dedicated time to growing the STEM Scholarship Fund for young women, the project I had promised myself I would see through to the end. Each month, I met with potential candidates, listened to their stories, and saw the light in their eyes when they received the good news. Every time, I thought of the 18, year-old girl who once walked into Stanford with nothing but an old suitcase and determination, and I knew I was giving others what I had once longed for. Not just financial support, but the affirmation that you can. One autumn afternoon, I stood before a group of female students at a technology seminar. When the Q&A ended, one of them hesitantly asked, "Do you have any advice for people who are seeking recognition from their family or from others?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds, looking around the room before saying, "Recognition isn't something you ask for. You create it and you give it to yourself. And when you do, you're no longer bound by whether or not someone else sees you." Those words weren't theory. They were the truth I had lived. I saw a few faces light up and knew I had planted a small seed in someone's heart. Now I no longer wait for congratulatory messages or calls from my parents whenever I reach a new milestone. I no longer feel the need to prove myself just to earn their approval. My new home, Milo, my friends, and the community I'm helping to build, they all make up a life I once thought existed only in imagination. And more importantly, I know I deserve it. Not because anyone says so, but because I built it myself. A year later, my life still revolved around my work at Lumina Diagnostics, tech conferences, and community projects. That December, an unexpected piece of news arrived. I had been named to Forbes' top 30 under 30 in the technology category. The awards ceremony was held in New York, bringing together hundreds of exceptional young leaders from around the world. As I stepped onto the stage to accept my plaque, the sound of applause filled the room. But this time, it didn't feel like the past. It wasn't about proving anything, but about honoring my own journey. That night, back at my hotel, my phone lit up with dozens of new notifications. Among the flood of congratulatory messages from friends and colleagues, I saw that my parents had shared the Forbes article on their Facebook pages with a short caption. Emma had left a clapping emoji. I read it and simply clicked, seen, not out of anger, but because I knew I no longer needed late recognition to understand my worth. I had come too far to go back searching for something I had once waited for in vain. A few days later, back in San Francisco, I drove out of the office on a late afternoon. The Golden Gate Bridge came into view, the sunset washing the water in gold. I rolled the window down, letting the ocean breeze rush in, carrying the salt and chill of the Pacific. Milo lay quietly in the back seat, his head resting on the window, golden ears flickering gently with every gust of wind. I turned on a soft jazz track, loosened my grip on the wheel, and let the rhythm of the drive blend with the rhythm of the waves. A calm began to spread, filling the empty spaces I once thought could never be filled. This city wasn't where I was born, but it was the place I chose to build a new life. A place where my worth was recognized not because of blood ties or favoritism, but because I had created it myself. As the car rolled across the bridge, I smiled, not the smile of someone who had defeated anyone, but the smile of someone who had finally found herself. I whispered softly, as if speaking to all the years behind me, I didn't win because they lost. I won because I chose myself. If you grew up feeling abandoned in your own home, overlooked, compared, or pushed aside, know that you are not alone. The indifference or coldness of others does not define your worth. What matters is not whether they see you, but whether you dare to see yourself. You cannot change the past or force anyone to love you the right way, but you can choose how to love and protect yourself starting today. Create your own opportunities, set your own standards, and walk forward boldly, even when nobody stands beside you. Recognition is not something to beg for. It's something you build step by step, through every effort and every time you stand back up. One day, you'll realize you no longer seek the approving glance of those who turned away, because when you choose yourself, you have already won. Not because they lost, but because you became the person they never believed you could be. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.